Millennia ago, on the verdant world of Ire, the Protoss walked as one, bound together by a vast psychic link. They were strong, disciplined, and, at least in the eyes of Aemon, a renegade of the ancient Xel'Naga, beautiful. Aemon sought the perfect life form to end the infinite cycle of his kind. And in the Protoss, he believed he had found purity of form. He revealed himself and his faction of like-minded Xel'Naga to the Protoss. The proud warriors fell to their knees, worshipping their creators as gods. But unity withered. Individual egos blossomed, eroding the psychic bond. The Protoss turned against one another, and as the Xel'Naga abandoned them, the eon of strife began, a civil war that consumed generations. In time, the Protoss rediscovered their link. They called it the Kala, and built both a religion and a philosophy around it. The Kala was their safeguard, their bulwark against ever falling to such chaos again. Yet not all would submit. A rogue faction, the Dark Templar, refused the Kala, and for this defiance, the Conclave, the Protoss's ruling council, cast them out. Centuries later, in the year 2259, Terran colonists drifted into the Koprulu Sector, settling in the shadow of Protoss space. True to the dictates of the Daul, their philosophy of non-interference, the Protoss observed these new arrivals from afar. Yet vigilance defined them, and when Executor Tassadar of the Koprulu Expeditionary Force uncovered Zerg probes near Terran worlds, the Protoss could no longer remain mere watchers. The Zerg were born far away, on the ash-choked world of Xeris. They began as little more than parasitic worms, yet Aemon saw them in a different perfection, purity of essence. He guided their evolution, but unlike the Protoss, he feared they too might stray. To prevent this, he created the Overmind, a vast intelligence to embody and direct the swarm. Into this being, Aemon planted a directive, binding it forever to seek out, destroy, and assimilate the Protoss, reshaping creation into Aemon's vision. The swarm thrived by consuming the genetic essence of other species. What could be assimilated was absorbed, what could not was annihilated. From Xeris, they conquered all life, even absorbing a spacefaring race and taking to the stars themselves. It was then that the Xel'Naga of Ulnar arrived, opposed to Aemon's designs. The battle that followed was apocalyptic. Aemon unleashed the swarm, and the Elnari fell. The Overmind had devoured them, consuming their knowledge. Aemon himself was cast into the void, banished, yet his directive remained. swarm left Xeris, its vast hunger now bent toward ire and the Protoss. As it consumed its way across the galaxy, the Overmind grew cautious. It knew the psychic might of the Protoss could overwhelm even the swarm. Worse still, it foresaw Amon's plan. Should the Protoss fall, their hybrid union with the Zerg would spell the swarm's eventual extinction. To escape this fate, the Overmind sought another species with psionic potential, one it could control. By the mid-25th century, it found its answer: humanity. The Terrans of the Koprulu Sector knew nothing of this looming threat. The Zerg had already discovered them 60 years before the Great War, but the Terrans themselves would not learn of the swarm for another 50. Among the Terrans, the Confederacy stood strongest. From their capital on Tarsanis, the old families ruled with corruption and iron control, exploiting colonies and fueling unrest. The most dangerous rebellion rose on Core Hall, led by Senator Angus Mangsk, and with the backing of Umoja. After the Confederacy crushed the Kelmorian Combine in the Guild Wars of 2480, filling its armies with newerly resocialized criminals, Core Hall declared independence. The Confederacy retaliated. Ghost operatives assassinated Senator Minsk, leaving his son Octurus to lead the movement. Under his command, the rebellion grew, renamed as the Sons of Core Hall. Meanwhile, the Confederacy discovered Zerg infestations on fringe worlds. They fought ruthlessly to contain them, yet secretly kept specimens for experimentation. By 2491, they had begun testing Zerg biology with psychic subjects. Among these was Sarah Kerrigan, a ghost rescued by Octurus Minsk, who rose to become his second in command. The Confederacy struck back hard against Core Hall, unleashing nuclear fire upon the world. But their heavy-handed tyranny only deepened resentment. The Sons of Core Hall endured, striking again and again, while the Confederacy abducted colonists and subjected them to resocialization to fill its dwindling ranks. By 2499, the Confederacy unveiled a new weapon, psi emitters. These devices projected ghost signals across interplanetary distances, luring Zerg into carefully laid traps. The plan was simple: draw the creatures in, let them devastate rivals, and then, heroically, destroy the monsters for glory and control. But their hubris called down disaster. In November, the Zerg arrived en masse at the sector's edge. The Overmind dispatched a scouting brood and soon uncovered over a dozen Terran worlds. Subtle at first, the swarm descended upon Chao Sara, spreading spores through the atmosphere, seeding creep across its surface, and raising hive clusters. Marsara, Brontes, and Dylar IV soon followed. At Chao Sara's Flanum installation, Confederate experiments spiraled out of control. Zerg overran the facility, and though the Confederacy fought them back, claiming victory from Los Angeles and suppressing all communication, the truth could not be buried. The Zerg had claimed Chow Sara. Then in December, Executor Tassadar arrived with the Koprulu Expeditionary Force. The Conclave issued a grim order: purge the world. Tassadar unleashed the Protoss's purifying fires. Every living thing on Chow Sara was scoured away. The Overmind merely watched, studying its enemy. Tassadar's orders did not end there. The Conclave demanded he cleanse every Terran world at risk of infestation, regardless of innocence. As his fleet turned toward Mar Sara, Tassadar began to question the morality of his mission. When word spread that humanity was not alone in the galaxy, that another species existed, and that they had annihilated an entire world, the reactions were as varied as they were chaotic. The Confederacy quickly imposed censorship on reports about the Protoss strike and the Sara system. Yet rumors spread anyway, racing across the stars until they reached Tarsanis itself. Universe News Network fanned the flames with sensationalist broadcasts, warning that an alien race had come to wipe out mankind. Among the people, emotions fractured: horror, religious awe, hope for peaceful contact, calls for war. Some clung to disbelief, refusing to accept the truth, even as the Confederacy itself trembled. Panic struck the economy, reversing the prosperity the Confederacy had enjoyed since its victory in the Guild Wars. Colonel Edmund Duke, fearing Mar Sara would be the Protoss's next target, hurled a reckless counterattack at Tassadar's fleet. Out of respect for the Terran's bravery, Tassadar pulled back. But in truth, it was doubt that stayed his hand. He could not bring himself to burn Mar Sara as the Conclave demanded. He retreated beyond Terran censors, determined to find another way to stop the Zerg without condemning humanity. For now, Mar Sara was spared, but with infestation spreading, no one could say for how long. The Confederacy already knew the truth. Mar Sara was infested. Outland colonies had gone silent in early December. Scouts confirmed Zerg activity the day before Chow Sara's destruction. Still, the knowledge was locked away, confined to the highest levels of government and a handful of old families. To the public, the Protoss seemed the greater threat, and Mar Sara was where this belief would be tested. While Duke tightened control of the fringe worlds, Mar Sara's new magistrate was ordered to relocate colonists into the wastelands under the guise of easing evacuation. Some cities, such as the capital, remained standing, but much of the populace was abandoned, left to the mercy of the Confederacy's propaganda. The colonists were told the Protoss had retreated out of cowardice. Yet the truth was clear to those on the ground. The Zerg were here, stalking the wilds, mutilating cattle, and closing in. Then came open war. Fighting erupted between the Confederacy and the Sons of Korhal. The Mar Sara colonial militia fended off an attack on one of their own command centers, then struck back and destroyed a rebel base. But the greater threat revealed itself soon after, when a Confederate team at Backwater Station, Marines, Firebats, and SCVs, was overrun by the Zerg. Colonial Marshal Jim Rader defied his orders to intervene. Duke told him to stand down. Rayner ignored him, leading his men to the rescue. There, amidst the chaos, they discovered something far worse: an infested command center. They destroyed it. But when reporter Michael Liberty carried news of the battle back to the public, the Confederacy moved swiftly. Rayner's militia was arrested and locked in a prison ship orbiting above the planet. The magistrate of Mar Sara saw the truth in this adjutant's reports. The Confederacy was deliberately avoiding battle with the Zerg. The Sons of Korhal, not the government, were the only ones offering any real help. The Confederacy prepared to evacuate Mar Sara, but there was unfinished business. The Sons of Korhal had stolen a mysterious box, a psi emitter. Already, the Zerg had overrun Oasis Station, drawn to the device's lure. The 417th Confederate Marine Platoon was sent to retrieve it. They succeeded, capturing both the box and a rebel operative. But their victory cost them dearly. Nearly half their number lost in the retreat. Their government then betrayed them. A tactical nuclear strike was launched to wipe them out, along with the emitter. Miraculously, they survived, taking refuge in an abandoned bunker complex known as Scenic, unaware they had been marked for death. It was the rebel prisoner who revealed the emitter's true power. The 417th understood then. Mar Sara's city was doomed. But if they activated the device, they could draw the Zerg away, buying time for evacuation. With only 90 minutes to prepare, the platoon turned Scenic into a fortress. When the swarm descended, they fought to the last man. Their sacrifice delayed the horde just long enough for the dropships to reach the city. Their final stand brought salvation. Minsk, joined now by Michael Liberty, struck an alliance with the magistrate. The militia braced for one final defense, holding the Zerg back for 30 desperate minutes until the Sons of Korhal's transports had arrived. Against all odds, the civilians escaped. Meanwhile, the Sons of Korhal freed Jim Raynor from his prison ship, bringing him into their cause. And soon after, Raynor led a strike into the Jacobs installation to steal weapons data. Marines and Firebats stormed the facility, cutting down Alpha Squadron troops and even captive Zerg, seizing the data disk before the installation self-destructed. They escaped only moments before it exploded. At Firebase Chimera, the Zerg struck again. This time, Executor Tassadar himself led Protoss forces to the surface, aiding the battered Terrans against the swarm. Yet even with their combined strength, Mars Sara could not be saved. The Sons of Korhal fled to Antigua Prime. 13 hours later, the Protoss returned. Tassadar carried out the Conclave's will. In a storm of purifying fire, Mars Sara was scoured of all life. After the fires of Mars Sara were extinguished, the Sons of Korhal struck again. Their fleet clashed with General Edmund Duke's forces in the Battle of Brontes, a brutal fleet skirmish that left behind a drifting graveyard of shattered warships and burning wreckage. From there, Arcturus Minsk turned his eyes to Antigua Prime. On its second moon, the Sons of Korhal moved to support a colonial revolt. The Confederacy was ready, seizing the Antiguan command center and securing the nearby road. But the rebels soon discovered they were not the only outsiders on Antigua. Zerg had infiltrated the shadows. Minsk dispatched Lieutenant Sarah Kerrigan, Captain Jim Rayner, and renegade reporter Michael Liberty, backed by additional troops. Rayner's men smashed the defensive structures, clearing the way for Kerrigan. Slipping inside, she slaughtered Alpha Squadron soldiers with ruthless efficiency. Liberty followed, capturing the moment as Kerrigan assassinated the Confederate officer in command. His report soon became a weapon of propaganda for Minsk. Alpha Squadron struck back, sending a counterattack against the rebels and their Antiguan allies. The coalition not only repelled them, but destroyed the nearby Confederate base, throwing Duke's forces into chaos. In the confusion, Zerg descended. Their assault crippled Alpha Squadron's flagship, the NORAD II, sending it plummeting to the surface. Desperate, Duke called for aid. Minsk, seizing the moment, ordered Rayner to lead the rescue. Sons of Korhal forces linked with Alpha Squadron remnants, together breaking through the swarms to free the stranded general. It was here Minsk made his move. He persuaded Duke to defect. The Sons of Korhal had gained not only a powerful fleet, but also one of the Confederacy's most prominent generals. The Confederacy retaliated with a massive blockade of Antigua Prime. Colonial fleet and army elements sealed the planet, while propaganda poisoned the airwaves. The rebels, they claimed, drugged Antiguan colonists and even Alpha Squadron soldiers into obedience. Duke was portrayed as a brainwashed husk, paraded as Minsk's puppet. Confederates painted the Sons of Korhal as allies of Protoss and Zerg, conspiring to enslave mankind. The blockade, they promised, would crush rebellion swiftly. Meanwhile, Minsk's propaganda pushed the opposite, that the Zerg were the Confederacy's own weapon. As the war ground on, the Sons of Korhal integrated Alpha Squadron into their ranks, reshaping their organization around it. Still, the stalemate dragged until breakthroughs came in blood. The old families, shaken by a duke's defection, began quietly evacuating their children from Tarsonis to Triador 9, hidden as vacations but meant as escape routes should the Confederacy fall. Meanwhile, the Zerg spread chaos wherever they went. Their invasion brought the rebel group known as the Fist of Redemption to Brontes 4, where the Civilian Council of Inquiry raised the Hammerstrike Force to stop them. Confederate ghosts provided support, but the government's heavy-handed crackdowns only sparked more unrest. The new Dresden outlaws rose in revolt, adding to the chaos. The Zerg followed in force, bringing with them the Incubus and Bahamut broods. Soon after, Tassadar's 7th Fleet arrived. The Protoss, for once, refrained from purging the world outright, choosing instead to fight the Zerg and Terrans conventionally. But infighting among the Protoss weakened their campaign, and worse still, renegade ghost Atticus Carpenter seized control of both Zerg broods, turning them into allies of the Fist of Redemption. The Fenris brood soon joined the conflict, and even when Terrans and Protoss tried to form a belated alliance, it was too late. Brontes 4 fell beneath the swarm. As the war dragged on, its rhythm grew grimly predictable. Minsk's propaganda fanned rebellion after rebellion. The Confederacy tightened its grip. Humanity bled itself into civil war, too consumed with fighting one another to resist infestation. By the time the Zerg arrived, resistance was scattered and unprepared. The Protoss alone had the strength to scour the infection, but their cleansing came at the cost of every world they touched. During one clash with Delta Squadron, the Sons of Kor Hall unveiled a new weapon, a psi emitter, reverse-engineered from Confederate technology stolen at Jacob's installation. Sarah Kerrigan was tasked with deploying it deep in a Confederate base. Despite Zerg interference, she succeeded. The device's pull was irresistible. Zerg swarmed across light years, converging on Antigua Prime in a tide of destruction. Confederate positions crumbled, the blockade shattered. The Sons of Kor Hall escaped the noose. Protoss forces intervened briefly, even aiding Raynor in rescuing colonists. But their mercy was fleeting. Tassadar's forces soon enacted judgment, purifying Antigua Prime of all life. The Confederacy twisted the loss into narrative. Minsk, they claimed, had bargained with aliens, only to be betrayed. Citizens were urged to enlist as fleets repositioned to Halcyon, a staging point between Antigua and Tarsonis. The Sons of Kor Hall pressed on. On the gas giant G-2275's moon, Kerrigan, Raynor, and Liberty led a strike on a Confederate facility. They annihilated defenses, seized upgraded Goliath walkers, and crippled a vital technological hub, denying the Confederacy both its designs and its weapons. On Orna 3, Another strike freed tortured test subjects and sympathetic scientists. Disguised as captives, Rayner and Kerrigan infiltrated, broke the prisoners out, and destroyed the base with demolition charges. The Confederacy's grip faltered. Victory after victory emboldened Minsk. Some, like Tarsonis bureaucrat Tamsin Cawley, became convinced Minsk's triumph was inevitable, unless he were killed. Cawley unleashed the war pigs, a band of criminals turned Confederate operatives upon the rebels. They failed to kill Minsk at Atticus Minor and barely escaped Confederate pursuit. Realizing Minsk's rise was unstoppable, Cawley sought to cover his betrayal by turning on the war pigs themselves. His scheme collapsed, and the mercenaries escaped his grasp. The revolution of Antigua Prime had turned the tide. Alpha Squadron's defection gave Minsk credibility. The psi emitters proved devastating. Now, he set his sights on Tarsonis itself. Confederate officials trusted in their formidable orbital defenses. Duke knew better. He had fought over Tarsonis more than 30 times. From the bridge of the NORAD II, he led the Sons of Korhal through weak points in its defenses, Delta and Omega squadrons collapsing before his advance. Kerrigan and Rayner spearheaded assaults on the surface, dismantling Nova, Delta, and Omega squadron factories. Reinforced by Duke's forces and their own psi emitters, they fought Confederate General Ledbetter's defenses to a bloody standstill. Battles raged even in the streets of Tarsonis City. The psi emitters did their work. The Zerg came. Confederate and Rebel alike were overwhelmed. Tacidar's Protoss arrived, intent on battling the swarm, but soon clashed with both Zerg and Terrans. Arcturus Minsk saw an opportunity in the chaos. Terrified that Confederate leaders might escape, he ordered Sarah Kerrigan to defend the Zerg hives at New Gettysburg against the Protoss. She and Rayner objected, but Minsk insisted. The result was carnage. A four-way struggle of rebels, Confederates, Zerg, and Protoss. Kerrigan's forces drove the Protoss back, only to be drowned by the Zerg. She called for extraction. No reinforcements came. Minsk had abandoned her. Jim Rayner, horrified, defied orders, stealing a dropship with Michael Liberty. They scoured the battlefield, but Kerrigan was gone. Their dropship fled to the battlecruiser Thunderchild, a sanctuary for refugees, before breaking orbit. Meanwhile, Minsk exploited the chaos to secure key assets. Media Magnet Handy Anderson, the Annihilators, and powerful ghost Nova Terra among them. Confederate resistance forces slipped away amidst the slaughter. The Zerg secured their prize, Sarah Kerrigan, and withdrew to Char. The Confederacy, once a galactic power, was shattered, and Tarsonis had fallen. The destruction of Tarsonis shattered the Confederacy. In the aftermath, most surviving Confederates threw in with the Sons of Korhal, including the remaining Confederate squadrons conscripted by force, handing the former rebels outright military supremacy. Minsk's organization rescued countless Terran lives, but it would not impose itself where it was unwelcome. As Minsk declared, each world's local government held ultimate authority over its own soil. Many survivors were ferried to Ursa. Ursa became a battlefield the moment terraformers, surveyors, and soldiers set down. Zerg descended, and John Dyer waged the campaign virtually alone. After killing his own men when he believed they'd been infested. During this tumult, Raynor's raiders launched a daring strike on the Dylarian shipyards to steal enough vessels to escape Minsk's shadow. Minsk sent General Edmund Duke in the flagship Hyperion to stop them, but the raiders prevailed. They stole the Hyperion and a slate of other ships, leaving Duke alive, tied and humiliated. Minsk's would-be government suffered a defeat before it could even be proclaimed, and yet he proclaimed it anyway. Arcturus Minsk announced the Terran Dominion, a new government to watch over the worlds asking for help. He promised victory over the aliens. For the first time, every Terran colony in the Koprulu Sector stood united beneath a single sovereign. Minsk's rule even encompassed the Kalmorian Combine. The newborn Dominion Marine Corps kept fighting the Zerg. Meanwhile, the Zerg carried Sarah Kerrigan to Char. From there, she reached out through the dark, psionically, contacting both Jim Raynor and Arcturus Minsk, revealing her location. Kerrigan's psionic emanations pulled Minsk's gaze to Char. He sent General Duke and Alpha Squadron to retrieve her and root out the swarm. They were beaten back. Soon after, Raynor's raiders landed, carving a path to her location, only for Kerrigan to emerge from a chrysalis as the Queen of Blades. Broken but alive, the raiders were allowed to withdraw. While the raiders regrouped on Char's surface, Kerrigan led infiltrations against both Alpha Squadron and the raider ships, forcing their flagships to flee. She boarded the science vessel Amerigo to plunder data on the Ghost program. Protoss under Tassadar, tracking the same psionic beacon, struck at the remaining infested ships of both sides. Amid the chaos, Raynor allied with Tassadar and Zeratul, the Dark Templar prelate who had assassinated Zaz, Cerebrates of the Garm Brood. Zaz's death threw the swarm into a frenzy. They annihilated the now renegade Garm Brood and destroyed the primary Protoss ships, though they were just illusory decoys. But when Zeratul killed Zaz, he brushed minds with the Overmind, inadvertently revealing Ire's location. The swarm launched at once. They smashed the vanguard of Ire, seized a Kardarian crystal, and used it to psychically anchor the Overmind upon Ire itself. Judicator Aldaris took command of the defense with Praetor Phoenix, and a new executor, Artanis. Phoenix found himself stranded at an unpowered outpost in Antioch. The Executor's relief force broke free and won the ground. From Char, Tassadar reached Aldaris and Artanis via Zeratul's psychic aid, explaining the Cerebrite's control over the swarm. Aldaris doubted. Phoenix listened. Phoenix led a Reaver strike on the local Cerebrite, while Artanis pinned Zerg defenses. The Cerebrite fell and resurrected moments later. Aldaris then ordered an assault on the hive clusters at Sion. The Executor prevailed there, but Phoenix's detachment at Antioch was overrun, and Phoenix was believed fallen. Convinced Tassadar's pact with the Dark Templar imperiled Ire more than the Zerg, Aldaris dispatched a force to Char to seize him. The alliance of Tassadar, Zeratul, and Raynor struck back through cunning, exploiting the lingering psychic tie between Raynor and Kerrigan. They lured the Queen of Blades into a trap. Channeled through newfound Dark Templar mastery, Tassadar personally slew Kerrigan's Cerebrate, severing her clean control of the swarm. She nonetheless rallied fragments and challenged the Protoss and Terrans. In the ensuing confrontation, she instantly removed Raynor from the fight and bested the Protoss leaders in single combat, only for Protoss reinforcements to arrive, prompting Zeratul to vanish into the shadows. Those reinforcements had come to arrest Tassadar. He convinced the Executor to forego the arrest and help find Zeratul and the Dark Templar instead. Tracing Zeratul to a Terran installation on Char, Tassadar fought through Zerg lines and Alpha Squadron remnants, and breached the facility with a small strike team, allied with the Terrans inside, and freed Zeratul, who pledged his blades to save Ire. The roots of the Protoss Civil War lay in the Eon of Strife. When severed from their psychic union, Protoss descended into slaughter until the Ka'ala had restored order. Another seed was sown a millennium before the Great War, when rogue tribes severed themselves deliberately from the Ka'ala. Conclave leader Cortanul ordered Executor Aiden to capture and execute them, and Aiden hid instead. Exile followed. Dark Templar became heresy. The Civil War ignited when Tassadar brought the Dark Templar, the only warrior who could truly kill Cerebrates, home to Ire. The vanguard of Ire, led by the Conclave, attacked, seeking to arrest Tassadar and Artanis. Protoss rebels shattered the Conclave's defenses and destroyed the heart of the Conclave, killing many of its members and beginning the end of Protoss governance as it had been. Horrified by Protoss killing Protoss, Tassadar surrendered. Aldaris arrested him. Zeratul and the Dark Templar vanished. Phoenix led what remained. The Conclave placed Tassadar in stasis pending trial. Fearing execution, Phoenix plotted a rescue. Jim Raynor, commanding the Hyperion, joined, repaying Tassadar for saving him on Char. Zeratul revealed what he had learned on Char. The Zerg were Xel'Naga creations. The Overmind sought to perfect life itself. Stopping it was imperative, not only for Ire, but for countless worlds. Phoenix and Zeradol set out to thin the Overmind's guard by assassinating 2 Cerebrates. Zeratul personally slew them both. Tassadar rallied his scattered forces. Raynor's raiders pledged themselves, and together, Protoss and Terrans marched. They plunged into the Hive cluster. The Tiamat and Jormungand broods fought like leviathans, but Tassadar's host reached the Overmind and cracked its armored shell. Losses mounted. The attack faltered, and the Overmind gathered itself to escape. Meanwhile, at the trial site, defended by Ara and Furinak's tribe forces, Phoenix and Raynor forced a breach and freed Tassadar. Aldaris arrived with a small fleet to stop them, only to be ambushed by Zeratul and the Dark Templar. Rhetoric flared. A secondary battle erupted. Its resolution came in the final assault, when even the Conclave conceded Tassadar had been right. Seeing the peril, Tassadar chose sacrifice. He would channel both the Void and the Kala through his flagship carrier, the Ganathror, and hurl that union as a spear. Mutalisks raked the hull, but could not turn it. A warp rift opened over the Overmind. The Ganathror's unleashed energy struck. The Overmind died. The remnants of its vast flesh were dragged into the rift as it sealed. In the Overmind's deathwake, the swarm ran wild. 70% of Ire's Protoss perished. Continents were scoured. Jungles turned to ash and wreckage and corpses. Non-Zerg life vanished from whole regions. Leaderless, the Zerg split. One faction rallied to Sarah Kerrigan, her swarm. Another gathered under Cerebrit Dagoth, and a newborn second Overmind. And thus, the Brood War had begun. The death of the Overmind, and with it, the loss of countless Cerebrates, left the Zerg horde in chaos. Leaderless, they rampaged unchecked across Ire, the sacred homeworld of the Protoss, consuming all life in their path. The devastation wrought was absolute. 70% of the Protoss population slaughtered, their ruling conclave wiped from existence. Yet, amid the ruin, a handful of champions endured. Aldaris the Judicator, Phoenix the Warrior Reborn, Zeratul the Dark Templar, and the Terran renegade Jim Raynor. Together, they stood as the last hope for Ire's survivors. While the Protoss fought for their very existence, the Terrans forged a new destiny. Arcturus Mengs, having cast down the corrupt Terran Confederacy, proclaimed himself Emperor of the newborn Terran Dominion. The fractured human factions of the Koprulu Sector, desperate for protection from the alien scourge, quickly bent the knee. With General Edmund Duke at his side, Minx absorbed the remnants of the Confederate military and secured his position as the sector's supreme Terran power. Yet even in his triumph, his thoughts lingered on Sarah Kerrigan, once his trusted lieutenant, now the Queen of Blades. Beyond the Koprulu Sector, the Terrans of Earth had watched in silence. Since the days of exile, the United Powers League had monitored its distant cousins, content to observe without interfering. That changed the moment the Protoss and Zerg revealed themselves. For the first time, humanity on Earth faced the undeniable reality of intelligent alien life. Panic gripped the League. Even the last independent nations, long resistant to UPL control, surrendered their sovereignty in the name of unity. Thus was born the United Earth Directorate, a government forged in fear, reshaped into a militarized power bent on survival. The UED devoted every resource to understanding the alien threat. For months, its analysts charted the strengths and weaknesses of both Protoss and Zerg. When word reached them of a newly spawned overmind, the Directorate resolved to act. An expeditionary force was raised, commanded by Admiral Gerard Dugal and his loyal comrade, Vice Admiral Alexei Stukov. Their mission was audacious: to seize control of the Zerg, harness their feral might, and crush both Dominion and Protoss resistance in one campaign. Yet, even at the onset, doubts lingered. Dugal distrusted the very idea of wielding the swarm as a weapon, believing such power to be too great a risk. He resolved to rely, wherever possible, on conventional arms and disciplined strategy. Still, the Directorate's plan was set. The fleet would be small, its strength multiplied by captured weaponry and careful precision. With that, the UED prepared to extend Earth's reach into the Koprulu Sector, believing the time had finally come to claim dominion over their wayward kin. The United Earth Directorate's expeditionary fleet slipped into the Koprulu Sector unseen, its presence unnoted by the Terran Dominion. Their first act was a test of arms, though no weapons of their own were fired. Instead, Admiral Dugal and Vice Admiral Stukov unleashed the Zerg upon an unsuspecting Terran colony. From orbit, they watched as the swarm descended, gathering data as the people below screamed and died. The Directorate did nothing to intervene, allowing the colony to be consumed before abandoning it to the hive. On Ire, leadership fell to young Artanis, newly appointed as Praetor. He joined Aldaris, Zeratul, and the Executor at a hidden base where they plotted their escape. At Zeratul's urging, the surviving Kali rallied to Ire's last functioning warp gate. Through swarms of Zerg they fought, Phoenix and Jim Raynor holding the line while the Executor shepherded the survivors through. The Protoss fled to the shadowed world of Shakuras, but Dagoth's forces seized the gate and poured through in pursuit. On Shakuras, Artanis, Zeratul, and the Executor searched for ground to claim, only to be ambushed by Hydralisks. They were saved by the Dark Templar, who revealed themselves as unexpected allies. Meanwhile, Raynor and Phoenix fought to secure the warp gate on Ire. 3 days after the evacuation began, the two warriors shut the gate down, cutting off pursuit but stranding countless Protoss. Some would splinter into new groups, like the Shelna Kryos, while others, including notable heroes, were lost in stasis cells. Soon, 2 of Dagoth's Cerebrits entrenched themselves within a Zelnaga temple. Razagal, matriarch of the Dark Templar, revealed that the temple could purge Shakuras of the Zerg. At her command, the Cerebrits were destroyed. It was then that Sarah Kerrigan appeared, demanding to be escorted to the Protoss Citadel. There, before Razagal, Aldaris, Zeratul, Artanis, and the Executor, Kerrigan announced the existence of a new Overmind. She swore she was no longer a mindless killer bound to its will. Aldaris refused to believe her and stormed away. Yet Zeratul's focus remained fixed on Shakuras' survival. When Razagal urged them to accept Kerrigan's aid in retrieving the Uraj and Kalas crystals, the Protoss reluctantly agreed. The first step lay on Braxis, a world abandoned long ago. Guided by Razagal's orders to destroy any who barred their path, Artanis, Zeratul, the Executor, and Kerrigan led an assault against entrenched Dominion forces. Dominion fortresses fell one by one, and Kerrigan's ruthless efficiency began to earn Zeratul's wary trust. In the end, the Protoss destroyed the great stronghold guarding the crystal, and the Uraj was secured. But the UED was not blind. Seeing Braxis as vital to their campaign, they established a vast orbital blockade, bristling with missile turrets powered by fusion generators. When Stukov demanded the Protoss to surrender, Artanis refused. Instead, he struck directly at the generators. And one by one, the turrets fell silent, and the Protoss fleet broke free of the trap. Frustrated, the Directorate abandoned pursuit. The next crystal lay on Char, once left behind during the Great War. The Kalas now lay perilously close to the still-growing Overmind. Together, the Protoss and Kerrigan's controlled Zerg planned their strike, either to snatch the crystal outright or weaken the Overmind enough to pacify its guardians. In the end, the mission succeeded. The Kalis was reclaimed, and the united force returned to Shakarus. Even as the crystals were brought home, Aldaris discovered a grim truth. Razagal was enthralled by Kerrigan's psychic will. By the time the fleet of the matriarch returned, Aldaris had rallied a legion of Kalai survivors to rise against her rule. Razagal commanded the executor to put down the rebellion. Though troubled by her fervor, both Zeratul and Artanis obeyed. Dark Archons were summoned, the first in a millennium, to strengthen their hand. In battle, Zeratul and Artanis tore away Aldaris' illusions and cornered him. He refused to surrender, instead trying to reveal Razagal's corruption. Before he could speak further, Kerrigan herself arrived and struck him down. Furious, Zeratul demanded she leave Shakarus. Kerrigan only laughed. Her goals had already been met. The Cerebrits were dead, and she had no further use for the world. She departed, leaving the Protoss to face the aftermath. With betrayal burning in their hearts, the Protoss turned to the final task. Zeratul knew activating the Zelnaga temple would serve Kerrigan's designs, but there was no other choice. Together, Artanis and Zeratul carried the Iraj and Kalis into the temple. Outside, the Protoss fought a desperate battle against the Zerg swarms, buying time as the structure awakened. When at last the crystals flared, the temple unleashed its power. The Zerg were annihilated. Shakarus was saved, though at a terrible cost. Once verdant, the world was reduced to a wasteland of scorched dunes and broken ruins. The Protoss had endured, but the shadow of Kerrigan's treachery still lingered over them all. The United Earth Directorate's fleet returned to Braxis, their eyes set on cracking open the Dominion from within. To succeed, they needed access to the Dominion's primary data net and its weapons diagnostics. For this, Atlas Wing was dispatched to capture the capital city of Boralis. Yet their landing zone was poorly chosen, bereft of Vespene gas and set against heavy defenses. Salvation came in the form of Lieutenant Samir Duran, commander of the so-called Confederate Resistance Forces. Duran offered them a secret path, a rear approach that would bypass Boralis' stronghold. He cloaked his offer in reason. He and his men, he said, were dedicated to the downfall of Arcturus Minsk. An alliance with the UED seemed only natural. Stukov harbored doubts, but Dugal agreed. Together, UED and Duran's forces stormed Boralis, crushing its Dominion garrison. From the city's databanks, the Directorate learned much about the Dominion, including the travel plans of Emperor Minsk himself. He was bound for Umoja to visit his son Valerian at the home of Valerian's grandfather, Aelin Pasture. A raid was staged to assassinate Minsk at this gathering, but the attempt failed. Undeterred, the UED pressed on. Intelligence pointed them next to the Dylarian shipyards, where Dominion battlecruisers lay in dry dock. Dominion reinforcements could arrive within 16 hours, Duran warned, so speed was vital. UED troops infiltrated, commandeering ship after ship. General Duke himself led a counterattack, refusing to yield even after Stukov revealed the fleet's true Earthborn origin. The battle was fierce, but the UED's newly stolen vessels triumphed. With Dylar IV conscripted and the shipyards themselves destroyed, the Directorate's hold on the sector tightened. It was then that UED researchers unearthed whispers of a powerful relic, the Psi Disruptor, a Confederate device lost during the fall of Tarsonis. Unlike a Psi emitter, this construct could disrupt Zerg psionic links entirely. Duran counseled its destruction, warning that such a weapon was too dangerous to exist. Stukov disagreed, insisting its power was the key to defeating the swarm. Dugal sided with Duran, or so it seemed. Duran was ordered to secure the relic, and after burning through 4 Zerg hives to reach it, he prepared to destroy it, only to be intercepted at the last moments by ghosts dispatched by Stukov, who had other plans for the device. The UED's next target was Core Hall itself, the heart of Minsk's dominion. Dominion High Command knew the storm was coming. In desperation, they tested a new plasma pulse weapon at the Broken Mesa, a weapon they hoped could annihilate the Directorate fleet. But betrayal cut them deeper than enemy fire. Senior scientist Osmel Dodds sabotaged the weapon, overloading its systems in a bid to curry favor with the UED. The resulting explosion tore apart both the weapon and its research facility. The stage was set for invasion. The UED now faced 2 formidable defenses: Minsk's vast nuclear arsenal and Core Hall's defensive fleet of battlecruisers. The Directorate's timetable forced a grim choice. They could only strike one before launching their ground assault. Whichever the case, their preemptive attack succeeded, and the path to the capital of Augustgrad was open. Minsk's armies fought bitterly, unleashing counterattacks and standing their ground with stubborn ferocity. Yet, the Directorate's numbers and momentum could not be denied. Augustgrad fell, and Minsk, cornered aboard the NORAD III, was forced to seek parley. But the Emperor would not face his end at Dugal's hands. On ire, Kerrigan approached Raynor and Phoenix with a proposal: rescue Minsk and bring him to her. Raynor, spurred by the greater threat of a second overmind in UED hands, reluctantly agreed. As the UED prepared to execute Minsk and his officers, salvation arrived. the Hyperion and a Protoss fleet blinked into existence, tearing Minsk from his captors by dimensional recall. Enraged, the Directorate pursued, chasing Raynor and Minsk to Ire, where they sought refuge at a Protoss encampment surrounding a warp gate. Zerg swarmed nearby, quiescent but ready to ignite into violence at the slightest spark. The UED struck hard, intent on destroying the encampment. Yet, as their forces pressed in, the warp gate activated, throwing the Zerg into a frenzy. In the chaos, Raynor and Minsk fled in a transport, only to be intercepted by a Directorate strike force. But then came the final betrayal. A vast swarm of Zerg crashed down upon the battlefield, summoned not by chance, but by Duran's design. He had withdrawn his troops at the critical moment, feigning ignorance. Stukov, furious, departed the battlefield in pursuit of his own suspicions. The Zerg consumed everything in their path. Raynor and Minsk slipped away, and the warp gate imploded in their wake. Admiral Stukov journeyed to Braxis, bringing with him his elite guard. There, he began rebuilding the Psi Disruptor. To Dougal, this move made little sense, until his sensors confirmed that the device was indeed active and fully functional. Duran was quick to poison the Admiral's mind, framing Stukov's actions as treachery. Swayed by his words, Dougal placed Duran in charge of a strike force, ordering him to make Stukov answer for his crimes. This assault tore its way through the Disruptor's defenses until they reached Stukov himself. In the confrontation that followed, Duran shot Stukov, disappearing into the shadows immediately after. Mortally wounded, Stukov used his last breath to warn Dougal that the real traitor was Duran, that the lieutenant might even be infested. But the realization came too late. With Duran gone, the UED troops found themselves battling swarms of Zerg that had infiltrated the Disruptor. Worse still, its core had been rigged to overload. In desperation, the remnants of Duran's strike force and Stukov's loyalists banded together, fighting side by side to stabilize the weapon. They succeeded, and the Psi Disruptor remained on Braxis, safeguarded by a planetary garrison. The Directorate then turned its sights upon Char. With the Disruptor active, Zerg coordination faltered, their broods scattered and confused. The UED fleet carved a path to the surface and confronted the Overmind itself. 3 Guardian broods stood in their way, one bolstering sunken colonies to unnatural resistance, another spawning waves of infested Terrans, and a third capable of birthing a monstrous Torask, a breed of Ultralisk that rose again and again after death. Piece by piece, the UED destroyed them all. With the brutes broken, medics approached the infant Overmind, pacifying it with potent neurostimulants. Victory was at hand, until Terran reappeared. By his side was Kerrigan. She mocked Dougal, taunting him with Stukov's death, and vowed to claim the swarm for herself. As her forces clashed with the Directorate, she withdrew, leaving the UED to consolidate its hollow triumph. The fleet issued a triumphant report back to Earth, heavy with propaganda and lies. Stukov's death was buried beneath falsehood, and Project Black Flag took shape, using psychers and drugs to keep the overmind in chains. But the Psi Disruptor crippled Kerrigan's command over her swarm. Broods slipped from her grasp. To rebuild, she bound a new Cerebrit to her service, promising it survival if it obeyed her completely. Duran reported that Zerg on Tarsanis had risen in revolt. Leading her reduced minions, the Cerebrit moved from hive to hive, reclaiming them one by one. Resistance was fierce, but each victory swelled her numbers as defectors joined her. Hunter-killers and even Torask strains fell back under her banner. The rebellion was crushed, and Kerrigan's rule restored. Seeking her next step, Kerrigan reached out to unlikely allies. Minsk was delivered to her in cryogenic hibernation by none other than Phoenix and Raynor. She told them she bore Minsk no malice and offered him a bargain: her aid in retaking Core Hall, in exchange for a Psi emitter to summon enough Zerg to destroy the Psi Disruptor. Minsk, powerless to refuse, agreed. Raynor's raiders struck first, demolishing the external generators that powered the device. Then, Minsk's SCVs descended with the emitter, drawing swarms of Zerg, drones, devouring ones, hunter-killers, even a Torask, straight to Kerrigan's hive cluster. With their aid, the Psi Disruptor was annihilated. Victory was hers, but unease simmered. Her allies wondered how long their pact would last now that Kerrigan commanded the swarm unopposed. For the moment, their eyes turned toward Core Hall. To prepare, Kerrigan needed resources. She set her gaze on Moria. Phoenix led the strike. Together, their forces crippled the fences, destroyed factories, and stripped the world of 10,000 minerals. With Core Hall in sight, Kerrigan, Raynor, Phoenix, and Minsk planned carefully. The UED had dug deep, fortresses, legions of troops, and their enslaved overmind. Raynor and Phoenix struck first, tearing at Augustgrad's outer defenses. Kerrigan's swarm then swept through the city itself, recapturing it for Minsk. Fewer Zerg opposed them than expected, leaving Kerrigan to suspect the Overmind resisted its shackles. Regardless, Augustgrad was won, and Minsk re-established his seat. Duke was dispatched to fortify their hold. Yet Kerrigan had no intention of honoring her alliance. With Core Hall reclaimed, her allies had outlived their usefulness. As Duke's forces regrouped and Phoenix's warriors rested, the swarm turned on them. For 6 merciless minutes, Kerrigan's Zerg rampaged unchecked. Both Duke, aboard the NORAD-3, and Phoenix himself took the field, but neither survived. When the bloodletting ended, Kerrigan recalled her forces to Tarsanis, leaving behind shattered armies and broken bonds. Minx swore vengeance. Raynor's hatred for her, once tempered by memory and hope, burned hotter than ever. Kerrigan had shown her true colors. 2 days after the massacre on Korhal, the UED Expeditionary Fleet unleashed their enslaved Zerg upon Kerrigan's fortress on Tarsanis. Hundreds of creatures surged forward, directed not by the Overmind, whose leash they barely held, but by human scientists struggling to coordinate them. Genetic engineers had even begun tampering with passive strains, reshaping them into weapons. The assault broke through many of Kerrigan's hive clusters. Yet, her Cerebrid rallied the remnants, and Kerrigan struck at the heart of her attackers. She ordered the deaths of the scientists, and with their deaths, the altered Zerg spun out of control, turning the tide, and Kerrigan's swarm achieved victory. But to destroy the Overmind, she needed more than her own strength. She required the Dark Templar, and for them, she needed Razagal. So Kerrigan and Terran returned to Chakaras. Razagal resided within Talamatros, a fortress whose power pylons generated an electromagnetic field that shielded it from Zerg air power. Terran proposed sabotage. He would plant charges on the pylons and overload the grid, collapsing the city's defenses. Kerrigan approved. As the ground shook with detonations, the pylons crumbled. The city fell in fire, and in the chaos, Razagal was taken. Kerrigan brought her captive to Char, where her final designs awaited. As she had foreseen, Zeratul arrived with a Protoss force seeking vengeance. Kerrigan revealed Razagal as a hostage, forcing the Dark Templar into a grim pact. Slay the Overmind for her, and she would release their matriarch. Zeratul raged, but Razagal herself urged compliance. And together, Protoss and Swarm fell upon the UED and their enslaved Zerg. The alliance triumphed, and Zeratul struck the killing blow upon the Overmind, the Nerazim finishing the Cerebrates one by one. Yet, when Zeratul demanded Razagal's freedom, the truth was laid bare. She was no longer free. Kerrigan's will bound her utterly. The Dark Templar stole her away regardless, breaking through Kerrigan's defenses. But the matriarch's chains were too deep. With a heavy heart, Zeratul ended Razagal's life, denying Kerrigan her prize. The Queen of Blades, impressed by his resolve, spared him, delighting in the guilt that would haunt him forever. After the battle on Char, Terran vanished from Kerrigan's side. She did not know where he had gone or why. Zeratul, fleeing with a small war band, searched the stars for Artanis and other survivors. Strange Protoss power signals drew them to a shadowed moon, but the signals were false. They came from a crude Terran device. Leading the strike himself, Zeratul uncovered a hidden facility guarded by mercenaries. Inside it lay horrors. Experiments blending Protoss and Zerg biology, weaving together what should never be joined. At the heart of it was all the proof. A hybrid abomination, alive within its stasis cell. Terran appeared then, confronting Zeratul. He revealed the hybrid as part of a vast cycle, a force destined to reshape the universe. Many such creatures, he said, already slept on countless worlds, awaiting their time. Zeratul recoiled in horror. He slew the hybrid, destroyed the facility, and fled. But the knowledge weighed upon him like a curse. He could not yet share what he had seen. On Char, Kerrigan's strength waned. Terran was gone, and much of her swarm lay stranded when 3 great fleets descended upon her. Minx's Dominion, Dugal's Directorate, and Artanis' Protoss. But one by one she crushed them. Minx's armada fell, its emperor forced into retreat, the vow of vengeance. Artanis, too, was broken, promising retribution. At last, only Dugal's UED fleet remained. Kerrigan would not grant him surrender. Instead, she gave him a mocking head start before loosing the swarm in pursuit. As the shattered fleet fled toward Earth, Dugal penned his final letter to his wife, admitting the folly of pride, the futility of taming the Zerg, and the guilt of Stukov's death. Then, he ended his own life. None of the Directorate's ships ever returned. When the Brood War ended, Kerrigan stood unchallenged. She allowed the Dominion and the Protoss to survive, for now. She sensed a greater storm looming. The Zerg withdrew into their territory, silent and unseen. Months passed, then years. No great offensives came. Some believed the Queen of Blades had settled her conquest. Others feared she prepared for something far worse. Those who ventured into swarm-held space in search of answers never returned. The Terran Dominion emerged weakened. It lost its grip on the Kalmorian Combine and the Omojan Proctorate, relying on mercenaries to plug its wounds. Yet, by 2502, it had recovered enough for Minx to declare the Zerg pacified and turn his eye back to consolidating his rule. The Protoss remade themselves into the Daylam, with Artanis as hierarch, uniting Kailai and Nerazim under one banner. Zeratul, broken by Razagal's death, vanished into exile. Jim Raynor continued the fight, not against the Zerg, but against Minx's Dominion, leading his raiders in rebellion. Yet his struggle saw little success. The Koprulu Sector remained scarred, but little had changed. The Directorate was gone, its invasion undone. The great powers licked their wounds, waiting. and 4 years of uneasy silence would pass before the fires of war would burn once again. After 9 long years in cryo-prison, Tychus Findley was released, but his freedom came at a cost. To be sealed within his old Confederate CMC armor as his new prison, until he successfully assassinates Sarah Kerrigan, and should he fail, the armor would shut down his major organs. I just want to take a moment to let you know that you can now find 2 Lord Asleep 2 podcasts on Spotify. One specifically for 40,000, and the other for all other lore. If you want to support the channel further and unlock some goodies for yourself, you can head over to my Patreon, where you can unlock exclusive Lord Asleep 2 audios. Or you can head to my Ko-fi, where you can commission your own custom sleep video. And finally, you can even find some super cool 40K inspired sleep merch on my website. Links for all of these are down in the description. Sleep well, and let's get back to your regularly scheduled sleep content. Meanwhile, across the dusty world of Marsara, the Terran Dominion was tightening its grip. Local colonies fell one by one beneath its banners, and among those resisting the occupation was rebel leader Jim Raynor, commander of the small but defiant force known as Raynor's Raiders. After the latest skirmish, Raynor returned to Joey Ray's bar, a familiar haunt from a simpler time. There, waiting for him, was his old friend, Tychus Findley, freshly freed, swaggering, and already scheming. Over shared drinks and old memories, Findley made a proposal. The Dominion had been seizing alien relics and outlawing their trade, excavating Xel'Naga artifacts across fringe worlds like Marsara. Findley had a buyer, the Mobius Foundation, once a legitimate scientific institution, now a shadowy client willing to pay handsomely. Raynor agreed, and together the Raiders and Findley's forces struck at a Dominion excavation site and made off with the first artifact. But their victory was short-lived, for shortly after, the Zerg came, and they struck without warning, overwhelming the surface of Marsara. The Raiders defended a settlement long enough for their battle cruiser, the Hyperion, to evacuate them from orbit. It soon became clear that Marsara was not alone. The Zerg were attacking Dominion worlds all across the sector. In the aftermath, Raynor was faced with a choice: rescue colonists from the farming world of Agria, or pursue another artifact buried deep within Protoss territory on Monolith. On Monolith, the Raiders found themselves caught between 2 enemies: Kerrigan's Zerg swarm and the Tal Darim, a fanatical Protoss splinter sect. The Raiders struck fast, seizing the artifact and escaping just before Kerrigan herself arrived, though not before she could taunt Raynor. Back aboard the Hyperion, Findley accessed the ship's archives to study the Queen of Blades, much to the irritation of Matt Horner, who hadn't authorized the intrusion. To Tychus, Kerrigan was a target to be eliminated, and to Horner, she was still a wound that haunted Raynor. The next artifact lay on the dead world of Zeal, where a Mobius expedition had vanished. On descent, the Raiders found the culprits, again the Tal'Darim, using a massive Draken laser drill as both tool and weapon. The raiders carved through Protoss defenses and recovered the artifacts where Mobius had failed. After Zeal, Raynor received an unexpected visitor, Zeratul, the Dark Templar. The Protoss did not come to fight. Instead, he delivered a warning. For all her sins, Kerrigan was the only one who could save them all from what was coming. He left Raynor an Ian crystal containing his memories, visions that would reveal the truth behind the prophecy of the Xel'Naga. When Raynor gazed into the crystal, he saw Zeratul's journey unfold. The Nerazim had traveled to Ulan, seeking the prophecy of the Xel'Naga's return. Kerrigan, too, was there, and the two clashed fiercely. Yet Zeratul sensed her heart was no longer in the fight. She, too, had glimpsed a future neither could stop. Zeratul escaped with fragments of the prophecy and sought to decipher them on Zakul. As Raynor continued to watch, his crew grew concerned. He was becoming lost in the visions. On Zakul, Zeratul discovered that the world's Protoss were enslaved by a hybrid creature, part Zerg, part Protoss. He fought and destroyed it, freeing the preservers, ancient seers who interpreted the prophecy. Their message spoke of a fallen one, and that what began with the Great Hungerer would end in darkness. Realizing the Great Hungerer must be the Overmind, Zeratul journeyed to Ire. Ire was a ruin. Among the carcass of the Overmind, Zeratul touched its thoughts and felt something unexpected: fear and joy. Within its cortex, he met the spirit of Tassadar, who revealed the truth. The Overmind had not been born evil. It had been corrupted by an outside force, the Dark Voice, who bent it to his will. Without free will of its own, the Overmind could not resist its purpose, but it could act in secret. It could create a being who would be free. That being was Sarah Kerrigan. The Overmind had seen what would come, and through Tassadar, Zeratul saw it too. Raynor's final vision was the end. The galaxy in flames, humanity consumed, the Protoss making their last stand on a shadowed world, the swarm enslaved to the hybrids and their unseen master. The Dark Voice mocked them all, revealing that Kerrigan, the one who might have saved them, had been slain. The Protoss fell, and darkness swallowed the stars. But the message was clear. The Queen of Blades, once humanity's greatest threat, was the only hope to save it. Meanwhile, in the galaxy, Kerrigan had made her next move, launching a full-scale assault on Tirador 8, the Mobius Foundation's headquarters. Their scientists managed to flee, but their data cores, containing the coordinates of remaining artifacts, were left behind. At the request of Dr. Emil Narud, the raiders destroyed the data before Kerrigan could reach it. The mission was a success, but the close encounter left Raynor shaken and adrift. The next artifact was located on Typhon 11, and as the planet's star collapsed into a supernova, the raiders fought through Tal'Darim forces and escaped with the relic moments before the world was consumed. Expecting to rendezvous with Mobius afterward, the raiders instead encountered a Dominion fleet, led by the flagship Bucephalus. Boarding the ship to confront Arcturus Minx himself, Raynor instead found Valerian Minsk, the Emperor's son. Valerian proposed an alliance to save Sarah Kerrigan from her infestation. Against his instincts, Raynor agreed. Their final objective lay aboard a Zelnaga world ship held by the Tal'Darim. Its executor arrived personally, but even his mighty mothership could not prevent the raiders from claiming the last piece of the artifact. Raynor's raiders, now allied with the Valerian Minx, set course for Char. Many aboard the Hyperion distrusted the mission, and Raynor himself. Among them was Milo Kokinski, and even Tychus Findlay, who drunkenly called his old friend a coward. When Raynor overheard and confronted him, the two fought in their armor until Raynor bested him. Standing over his old friend, Raynor reminded the crew that the Zerg were the greater evil, and saving Kerrigan meant saving humanity. And so they prepared for war. On the surface of Char, the Terran landing was a disaster. Dropships burned in the atmosphere. Strike teams vanished. Only a handful survived to establish a foothold, where Raynor led a rescue of General Horace Warfield and his stranded men. To reach the primary hive, the raiders needed to cripple the Zerg support, either the Nidus network that spawned their endless reinforcements, or their fast aerial broods that dominated the skies. Once those threats were neutralized, the path to the hive opened. General Warfield, now bearing a cybernetic arm, delivered the assembled Zelnaga artifact to Raynor. After a rousing speech, Raynor rallied the Terrans for one last stand. As waves of Zerg crashed against their lines, the artifact began to change. When it reached full power, it unleashed a cataclysmic energy nova. The Zerg horde disintegrated, and at its center, Sarah Kerrigan was reborn, partly de-infested, but alive. Raynor and Finlay led a team into the hive to recover her, but there, Tychus made his move. He revealed the truth of his release. Minsk had sent him to kill Kerrigan in exchange for his freedom. Raynor stood between them. Tychus hesitated, but then he drew. One shot echoed through the hive, and when the smoke cleared, Tychus Findlay lay dead. Raynor carried Kerrigan's unconscious form out into the dawn of Char, a broken sunrise over a scarred world. Valerian Minsk's gamble had succeeded. The Battle of Char had ended in a hard-won Terran victory. Sarah Kerrigan, de-infested at last, and the Zelnaga artifact that had purged her were ferried aboard the Dominion flagship Bucephalus. Nearby, Emperor Arcturus Minx waited aboard his own battlecruiser, the White Star, with the remainder of the Dominion armada. The moment the dust settled, he demanded custody of Kerrigan, not for study, but for execution. His son, Prince Valerian Minsk, refused. He had seen the prophecy, the warnings of the Dark Voice, and knew Kerrigan's survival might determine the fate of the sector. The Emperor's patience snapped. He prepared to seize her by force, even if it meant killing his own son. Amidst the chaos, the remnants of the invasion fleet took heavy damage, but managed to break away. Raynor's raiders aboard the Hyperion drew swarms of Zerg toward the White Star, forcing the Dominion to disengage and giving the rebels their escape. Valyrian's plan was simple. Bring Kerrigan, though still weak and fevered from de-infestation, to Dr. Emil Narud, an expert in Zerg physiology and the head of the Mobius Foundation. But the Dominion wasn't done. Hidden tracking beacons aboard the Bucephalus revealed their position within minutes of leaving orbit. The Dominion intercepted them, sparking a running battle through the void. The raiders escaped, but lost ships in the process. To cut the trackers for good, Rory Swan, Earl, and Annabelle Thatcher boarded the Bucephalus and tore the devices out by hand. When another Dominion ambush followed, the rebels retaliated by ramming the abandoned battlecruiser Heracles straight into the White Star. The Dominion flagship survived, crippled but not destroyed. By the time the fighting ended, the rebel fleet had been reduced to just 2 ships, the Bucephalus and the Hyperion, both scarred but still flying. At Raynor's suggestion, the rebels limped to Dead Man's Rock, a lawless haven ruled by the infamous crime lord Mira Han. There, among drifting wreckage and pirate strongholds, the Bucephalus and Hyperion hid within a vast field of derelicts, while Raynor, Valyrian, and Kerrigan descended to the surface. They were joined by Dr. Narud, who claimed he could continue Kerrigan's treatment in safety. Mira Han, ever the opportunist, agreed to shelter them for a price. She assigned one of her mercenaries, Gary Crane, to oversee their protection. What she didn't know was that Crane planned to betray her. Separated and unaware of the coming danger, the rebels gathered in a safe house while Kerrigan rested, her mind flickering with flashes of her old power. It was those powers that saved them. Kerrigan sensed the ambush moments before it struck. Crane's fleet descended, including a mercenary battle cruiser that opened fire on the hidden rebel ships. Rory Swan immediately ordered the Hyperion to break cover and launch. On the surface, Raynor, Valyrian, Matt Horner, and Narud were caught in the open, leaving a meeting at a local bar. Horner was wounded in the exchange, forcing the group to flee into an abandoned prefab shelter. Horner sent a distress signal to Mira Han, while Valyrian ordered the Bucephalus into combat. Above them, the Bucephalus unleashed its elite Viking squadrons, shredding the mercenary attack wings and buying the rebels precious time. Han arranged for Kerrigan's evacuation to the Bucephalus, then passed word of a hidden tunnel that would let the others escape undetected. Crane, unaware of this, contacted Cooper, a turncoat within Raynor's raiders, to track them. But before Crane could close in, Mira Han's reinforcements arrived. The mercenary lord turned on Crane the instant the rebels were safe, erasing her own mistake in a storm of gunfire. The rebels' next destination was Space Station Prometheus, a secret Mobius Foundation facility hidden deep within the Kierkegaard belt. The The Bucephalus and Hyperion crept through the belt's treacherous debris fields, taking on repair crews from Prometheus along the way. While the ships underwent maintenance, Valerian, Raynor, Kerrigan, Narud, and Egan Stetman traveled ahead to the station itself. But Kerrigan didn't trust Narud, and she was right. The Doctor had secretly aligned himself with Emperor Minsk. The repairs were a trap. The crews aboard the rebel ships were saboteurs. As the systems were quietly crippled, Narud entertained Valerian and Raynor in the station's lounge, while Kerrigan underwent preliminary tests under Stetman's supervision. When the sabotage was complete, Narud made his move. Dominion forces dropped out of warp speed, encircling the rebels. Kerrigan fought her way out of the lab, cutting down Marines and a ghost operative before rescuing Stetman. Raynor eluded capture as well, but when he tried to reach them, he was confronted by two hybrids under Narud's control. Then came the Emperor's voice. Minx himself broadcast across the station, offering the raiders safe passage if they surrendered Kerrigan for execution. The sound of his voice ignited a fury within her. Kerrigan unleashed her psionic power, annihilating the hybrids in an explosion of raw force. On the ships above, Horner's crew detected the sabotage just in time to avert total loss. Engineering teams fought the infiltrators, while pilots scrambled fighters to protect the crippled vessels. In the chaos, Cooper, flying a Wraith, shot down another Wraith from the Dominion squadron. Meanwhile, Valerian, Raynor, Kerrigan, and Stetman regrouped on the station. Narud fled ahead of them, carrying the Zelnaga artifact toward a transport. The raiders launched the dropship Fanfare, newly refitted and armed, with Annabelle Thatcher aboard to handle its weapon systems. Fanfare strafed Narud's transport, but he slipped away. On the station, Kerrigan faced another hybrid in brutal combat. The Fanfare intervened, killing the creature, but the psychic backlash killed Thatcher in the process. As the Dominion flagship White Star moved to intercept, Bucephalus engaged it directly, holding the line. Once the Fanfare's crew was extracted, the rebels executed a desperate escape plan. They irradiated the surrounding dust clouds, disrupting sensors, then performed a series of short, staggered warp jumps through the belt. It was enough to lose the pursuit. Valerian directed the fleet to a secret Umajan Protectorate orbital platform, where the ships could undergo full repairs, and where Kerrigan could finally receive real medical treatment. Soon after, Kerrigan was transferred to Umajan Research Station EB-103, where scientists studied the remaining traces of Zerg mutagen within her, but the Dominion's reach was long. Led by Nova Terra, Dominion ghost operatives stormed the facility. In the chaos, Raynor was captured. Valerian, Horner, and Kerrigan were forced to flee. Cut off and unable to recover him, Kerrigan vanished into the void. Her next move would ignite the second act of the Second Great War, a return to the Swarm, and a reckoning with all who betrayed her. After the Terran Dominion's victory on Char, the Zerg swarm had laid scattered and broken. Its queen, Sarah Kerrigan, had been transformed, her humanity restored, though remnants of the Zerg still clung to her flesh like living scars. The dreadlocked tendrils that framed her face were not hair, but reminders of what she had been. Whether her true humanity, her original personality, had fully returned remained uncertain even to her. After the chaos at the Umajin research facility, Kerrigan had fought her way out and fled into the void, to the rendezvous point her and Raynor had agreed upon, unaware that he had been captured and hoping to find him. Instead, she found only Dominion troops guarding a Draken pulse cannon. There, she reclaimed the Nactal brood, turning their fury against the Terrans and annihilating the force that had taken her love. When the battle was over, Raynor was still missing. Then came the broadcast. The UNN reported Jem Raynor's death. That's the moment that broke her and hardened her. Her grief turned into vengeance. Arcturus Minx would die for what he had done. Aboard a vast Zerg Leviathan, Kerrigan began to reassemble her power. There, she found Abathur, the Gene Shaper, and Isha, her old adjutant, both still loyal, both waiting to serve their queen once more. Kerrigan's first target was Kaldir, where the rogue brood mother Nafash had gone silent. She arrived to find the brood feral and leaderless, Nafash slain by the Protoss colonists who had settled the world. The Protoss sought to contact Chakras, hoping to summon the Golden Armada to destroy her. But Kerrigan struck first, tearing down their Psi-Link spires and arc shuttles before any message could escape. The colonists made one last attempt, fleeing aboard a Dalium arc, but Kerrigan was not finished. She implanted a larva within the Protoss Lasara, spawning a new broodmother aboard the ship itself. The Zerg tore through the arc before it could make contact with Chakras. None survived. Next, Kerrigan turned her gaze toward Char, the world where she had once reigned, now under the control of the Terran Dominion and General Horace Warfield. Before facing the Dominion, she clashed with Zagara, a rebellious broodmother who denied her claim to leadership. Kerrigan defeated her, but spared her life, ordering Abathur to reshape Zagara's form and mind, making her stronger and more loyal. Together, they stormed Warfield's stronghold, the heavily fortified Bone Trench. Wave after wave of Zerg smashed against the Dominion lines until the Terran defenses finally fell. In the aftermath, Kerrigan confronted the wounded general. Warfield, defiant even in death, condemned her for what she had become. His final words gave her pause, and for the first time since her rebirth, mercy stirred in her heart. She allowed the surviving Dominion soldiers to live. Not long after, the Leviathan was boarded by Prelate Zeratul. Kerrigan's fury erupted at the sight of him, the Protoss who had once abandoned her to her fate. But Zeratul came not as an enemy. He brought a vision of prophecy, a glimpse of Xeris, the primordial homeworld of the Zerg. There, he said, her destiny awaited. Only on Xeris could she reclaim her full power and fulfill what the Xel'Naga had foreseen. Driven by vengeance and the promise of strength, Kerrigan set a course for the ancient world. On Xeris, she faced the savage pack leaders who ruled the primal Zerg and awakened the colossal creature known as Zervan, the Ancient One. Zervan spoke of the first spawning pool, where the essence of all Zerg life began. There, Kerrigan could be reborn, not as she had been, but as something more. While Abathur and Isha defended her cocoon, Kerrigan entered the pool. When she emerged, she was transformed, a being of immense power, beyond even the Queen of Blades. One primal, Dahaka, came forward in awe and pledged his allegiance. The others gathered their packs in defiance. Kerrigan crushed them all, even Zervan himself, binding the primal swarms to her will. Soon after, Arcturus Minx reached out to her personally. His voice came over the comms, calm and cruel. He told her that Raynor was alive, and that if she moved against the Dominion, he would kill him. Kerrigan could not sense Raynor's life through the void, but she swore to find him. To locate him, she contacted Matt Horner and Valerian Minsk, who believed only Colonel Orlan could break the Dominion's deep encryption network. Orlan, however, was in the custody of Mira Han, who refused to release him. Horner led the Hyperion against Han's fortress in a ferocious assault. When the dust settled, Orlan was free. Using the decrypted data, he pinpointed Raynor's location aboard the Dominion prison ship, Morose. Kerrigan led the raid herself. She tore through the guards and freed him. But the reunion was not what she had imagined. Seeing her transformed once again, Raynor turned away, believing she had reinfested herself. Silent and broken, he left the ship. Soon after, a psionic echo reached the swarm, a message from Alexei Stukov. The once-infested Terran returned to life. He spoke of a secret Dominion hybrid breeding program on Skygear platform. Kerrigan vowed to end it. She led her broods in the assault, infesting the Marines guarding the outer defenses and tearing into the heart of the station. There she discovered the truth. Dr. Emil Nerud, the scientist she once trusted, was no man at all. He was an ancient Xel'Naga, hiding behind human form. Kerrigan's fury knew no bounds. Nerud unleashed hybrid monstrosities against her, but she destroyed them all, pushing deeper into the Xel'Naga ruins that formed the base's foundation. Within, she clashed with the Tal'Darim, the fanatical Protoss devoted to the ancient gods, and finally confronted Nerud himself. As Stukov commanded the swarm to deactivate the shrines that powered Nerud's strength, Kerrigan battled him within this null zone, a void where her powers were weakened. She fought through the suppression, wounding him deeply. But Nerud fled deeper into the ruins, shifting his form, first into Jim Raynor, then into Kerrigan's own human likeness. In a final, brutal duel, she slew him. With his dying breath, Narud spoke the name of his true master, Aemon, the fallen Xel'Naga, and the darkness that awaited the galaxy. Zagara recovered her wounded queen from the ruins. Kerrigan's vengeance burned brighter than ever. She swore that once Arcturus Minsk was dead, she would face Aemon herself. At last, Kerrigan's campaign of vengeance led her to Kor Hall, the Dominion capital. She gathered her broods for a final assault on Augustgrad, where Minsk ruled. Valerian begged her to land outside the city so he could evacuate civilians. Reluctantly, she agreed. The orbital defenses of Kor Hall were formidable. Millions of Zerg died in the descent, burned from the skies. But Kerrigan adapted. She created bio-launchers, organic siege weapons, capable of tearing through planetary shields and orbital cannons alike. One by one, Kor Hall's defenses fell. In desperation, Minx unleashed his greatest weapon, the Psi Destroyer, a massive device capable of annihilating any Zerg linked to the hive mind. The swarm screamed in agony. But Dahaka and his primal Zerg were free from the hive's control, and they struck the destroyer's power generators. With their help, Kerrigan destroyed the Psi Destroyer. Now nothing stood between her and Minsk. As she breached the palace walls, Minsk sent his elite guard to hold her back. Above, Raynor and the Hyperion provided covering fire, carving a path through the chaos. Inside, Kerrigan confronted the Emperor himself. Minsk had prepared for this, wielding the Keystone, a relic capable of nullifying her psionic powers. But before he could strike, Raynor burst in and shattered Minsk's control device. Freed from its grasp, Kerrigan unleashed her full might. A psionic pulse rippled through the chamber, vaporizing the man who had betrayed her, haunted her, and hunted her for years. When it was over, Minsk was gone. Kerrigan turned to Jim and offered a final thanks. Then, without another word, she rose into the air, her wings unfolding in a shimmer of living light. As she flew away, her broods rallied behind her, no longer for vengeance, but for what came next. For beyond Minsk and the Dominion, far darker power awaited. Aemon had begun to stir. On a lonely asteroid orbiting Ire, Artanis stood beside Caldalis, his oldest and most loyal friend. Tomorrow, they would begin the reclamation of their homeworld, the first great campaign of the unified Protoss Daelam. Artanis looked out toward the shattered surface of Ire, and confessed his doubt. Was it right, he wondered, to sacrifice so many for a world that symbolized the civilization long dead? Ire had fallen not to strength of enemies, but to the weakness of the Protoss themselves, their pride, their disunity, their blind devotion to the Kala. Caldalis' reply was resolute. They were not fighting for the past, he said, but for the future, for a new, united Protoss civilization that had learned from its old mistakes. ire was no longer a symbol of what was lost. It would become the foundation of what was to come. Artanis was silent, but in his heart, his doubts erased. Together, they returned to the Golden Armada, and the next day, the reclamation began. In the opening days of battle, as narrated by Artanis himself, the Protoss armadas descended on Ire, their golden ships breaking through the clouds as warriors blinked into battle against the entrenched Zerg. Kaldalis fought to the forefront, proclaiming with the unity of the Kala they could not lose. High Templar merged their minds and bodies into burning Archons, unleashing destruction upon the swarms. But it was all a lie. The reclamation was a trap. Aemon, the fallen Xel'Naga, had waited for this moment. Through the Kala, the psychic link that bound all Protoss together, he reached out and seized control of the Daelam. Only Zeradol understood what was happening. He arrived too late to save Artanis, and so, in his final act, he fought his brother to the ground and severed his nerve cords, freeing him from Aemon's grasp, the cost of his own life. As Zeradol fell, Artanis mourned him, vowing to fulfill his dying wish, to unite their people and end Aemon's corruption once and for all. Among the chaos, Artanis gathered others who had been freed by the Nerazim's blade, including the phase-smith Karax, and escaped aboard an ancient ship long thought lost, the Spear of Adun. Within its halls, the Protoss marveled at the technology of their ancestors. Karax began freeing other warriors still in stasis by cutting their cords. There, Artanis discovered Rohana, a grand preserver of the old era. She still bore her nerve cords, insisting she could resist Aemon's influence and serve better by keeping them. Artanis reluctantly allowed it. To rebuild his forces, Artanis needed allies. The first came through the Nerazim matriarch, Vorazun, who contacted him in distress. Aemon had opened a portal from Ire to Shakaris, flooding her world with Zerg and hybrid. Honoring Zeradol's wish, Artanis directed the Spear of Adun to Shakaris, aiding in the evacuation of as many Nerazim as possible. But it was not enough. To deny Aemon his prize, Vorazun proposed the unthinkable, overloading the planet's core to destroy both Shakaris and the invading host. Artanis agreed. Once enough of Aemon's forces had entered the planet, the core was detonated. The explosion obliterated Shakaris, erasing both the invaders and the Nerazim's sacred homeworld. The survivors were welcomed aboard the Spear of Adun. Together, Artanis and Vorazun swore vengeance. The matriarch dispatched her elite Templar to hunt down Aemon's hybrid facilities across the sector. Artanis next set course for Core Hall, where he was met by Jim Raynor. Old friends reunited, but the meeting was bittersweet. When Artanis spoke of Zeratol's death, Raynor bowed his head in silence. Artanis requested the keystone, believing it might help them imprison Aemon. Rayner agreed, but warned that Core Hall itself was under siege. The Mobius Corps, once loyal scientists and mercenaries, had fallen under Aemon's influence. Their hybrid-led forces had crippled Sky Shield, an orbital defense platform that, if fallen, would crush Augustgrad below. Together, the Protoss and Terran stabilized Sky Shield, saving the capital city. But Aemon's corruption ran deep. Mobius troops now carried out his will, channeling void energy through the Keystone to stun both Dominion and Mobius soldiers alike. Despite the chaos, the Protoss prevailed. They recovered the Keystone, and Karax began studying aboard the Spear of Adun. His conclusion was astonishing. The artifact could be used to trap Aemon's essence, sealing him within and banishing him back to the void. Karax soon discovered that a purifier facility on Glacius was under attack by Tal'Darim forces, led by Alarak, who intended to destroy it. The Daelam arrived in time to warp the facility's cache away, catching Alarak's attention. Within the cache, the Protoss discovered a familiar figure, Phoenix, his consciousness preserved in a mechanical shell, confused and disoriented, believing himself still a Dragoon. Soon after, the Daelam traveled to Ulnar, seeking answers from the Xel'Naga themselves. There, they encountered Sarah Kerrigan and reluctantly agreed to an alliance against Aemon. Together, they searched for the ancient beings, only to find them all dead. Meanwhile, Alarak boarded the Spear of Adun to warn Vorazun that Artanis was walking into a trap. She dispatched rescue forces just in time. On Ulnar, Aemon had opened portals to the void, attempting to consume both Kerrigan and Artanis. Their combined strength destroyed the rifts, and the two parted as uneasy allies. Back aboard the Spear of Adun, Alarak revealed Aemon's betrayal of the Tal'Darim and proposed a bargain. He would challenge High Lord Malash through the ancient ritual of Rak'Shir. If victorious, he would unite the Tal'Darim under his command and cease hostilities with the Daelam for now. Artanis agreed, but warned him to tread carefully. On the world of Slayan, Alarak fought Malash amid the roaring of his death fleet. Protoss warriors slew Malash's guardians to ensure the duel was fair. Even with the hybrid's aid, Malash fell, and Alarak became High Lord, taking control of the entire Tal'Darim. At Phoenix's urging, Artanis sought another ally, the Purifiers, ancient AI warriors slumbering aboard Cybros, orbiting the world of Indian. Rohana objected, believing the Purifiers untrustworthy, but Artanis pressed forward. Disabling the planetary shields awoke not only the Purifiers, but also the Zerg and Hybrid who sought to infest the facility. The Protoss fought fiercely, reactivating Cybros' defenses and cleansing the world. In gratitude, the Purifiers purged Indian of the Zerg entirely. Their leader, Chlorlarian, was wary but impressed. He agreed to join Artanis' cause, naming Phoenix as their representative among the Daelam. Vorazun's Templar returned soon after, reporting a Mobius hybrid facility in the Revanskar asteroid belt. While Mobius forces engaged the main fleet, Korax led a smaller strike team into the facility's core. His actions destroyed the hybrid lab and crippled Aemon's operations in the region. For his valor, Artanis promoted Korax to Templar, an honor few phase smiths had ever earned. Furious, Aemon sent a vision to Artanis, taunting him and demanding he return to Ire. Rohana confirmed the truth. Aemon intended to unleash the Golden Armada, now under his control, upon their homeworld. If the Protoss could destroy the psionic matrices powering the fleet, they might delay its arrival. Artanis convened with his war council, Vorazun, Alarak, Phoenix, and Korax. Together, they forged a final plan. Alarak argued to simply annihilate Ire and end it quickly, but the others, especially Phoenix, refused to accept such ruin. Dividing their forces into 3 strike groups, they struck the psi matrices across Ire. Each was destroyed in turn, delaying Aemon's fleet. But the Dark God attempted to anchor his consciousness in an incomplete hybrid body, forcing the Protoss to destroy the void shards empowering it. The hybrid body collapsed, but Aemon's essence endured. Then came the storm. The Golden Armada, possessed by Aemon, descended upon Ire, joined by Zerg and corrupted Protoss led by Executor Selendis. The Daelam held the line long enough for the Keystone to fully charge. In the final battle, Artanis faced Selendis herself. Through their clash, he broke Aemon's hold on her and convinced her to sever her connection to the Kala. One by one, the freed Protoss followed her example, cutting their nerve cords and shattering the psychic prison that Aemon controlled. Deprived of hosts, the Dark God was drawn screaming back into the void, and, at long last, silence fell over Ire.